The aftermath. It had been a decade of war. The cold, dark times were more than anyone could take. I was the last of my family. I survived on will alone. I was determined to find somewhere or something that made life worthwhile. After the powers that be fought severely amongst themselves with their words, eventually it came out physically. The House and the Senate were divided across the board. It was like either side was just going against what the other had to say, out of spite. In a major move of pride, the president declared war on his own country. We fell apart from the inside out. It was a senseless act of an ego that needed more stroking than anyone could have ever provided. By the time war broke out and chaos descended into madness, I was on neither side. Then came the riots, the ignorant masses that just destroyed anything and everything. The people with money had fled the country long before the first blow or hid away in their fortresses. But poor people, like myself, were stuck. I watched around me as my entire world crumbled before my eyes. Buildings fell. Something was always on fire. Other countries completely turned their backs on us. So, we had nothing of an imported nature. Workers went on strike. It was not like they were getting paid anyway. Another run on the banks. As if the first time around did not teach them anything. The internet went first. The internet crash was the single most devastating event I had ever witnessed. People just went nuts. When there was no more Facebook, people didn't know how to function. Then, the electricity went out. Now, we were sent back to the Dark Ages. My mom and dad killed themselves, jumped off a bridge hand in hand. They knew there was no way out of this one. Many people viewed suicide as the solution. It sure cut the population. People who did not know how to live without their gadgets and their constant scrolling. Life no longer mattered to them. I, for one, did not care. I was glad to be rid of technology in that sense. I loathed seeing what all my so-called friends were up to every day. So I didn't bother to use it. So when the internet crashed, it had no effect on me. What did have an effect was the fact that there was no order to the chaos at all. Police no longer worked. Emergency services were no longer a thing. It was literally everyone for themselves. I lived out west, in a small town in Montana. Everyone I knew had banded together to go take on all the wealthiest people, holed up in their mansions with lifetime supplies of food. The president had long since perished, as did most political figures in the Battle of D.C. I am sure it will be immortalized in history books if we ever get out of the Dark Ages. I decided to find a nice cave to live my life out in. I had been living on the streets for a while like everyone else practically. My apartment had burned down months ago. I had few possessions that were all neatly tucked in my backpack. I was used to living outside now. But with autumn approaching, I needed to find a good place to stay warm. Maybe hunt some game for sustenance. Wildlife seemed to be thriving in quiet forest locations, undisturbed by what the humans were doing. I had been walking for days in the lush wilderness when a voice reached my ears. "Where are you going, sir?" I turned to see a young woman my age. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Long, dark hair with big, piercing eyes. She was clean, unlike myself, who hadn't showered for days, and clean clothing. "I'm not sure yet, trying to find a spot to call home," I told her. "Come with me," she said hypnotically. I couldn't resist. There was a beautiful, pristine woman beckoning me. I had to follow. She led me to a clearing in the woods with a path that followed to a huge rock formation. She shouted in a voice much like a bird of prey, and a secret door opened from the rocks. "This way," she said, and turned and walked through the open spot in the rocks. I followed blindly through the dark. I felt the rocks on either side of me. Their smooth, cool surface felt comforting in a way, like when I would look for rocks in my grandparents' pond. I heard a loud noise and looked behind as the secret door slammed shut. It jarred me slightly, but I focused forward as a bit of light was peeking through in front of my new companion. I heard and saw the crackling of fire coming into view. We were inside a mountain. I heard other voices coming closer. "Adelaide, I see you have brought a guest." An older gentleman appeared and was enthusiastic about my arrival. "Welcome to Mount Phoenix, our mountain, Utopia. We have risen from the ashes to create perfect society. We always welcome new members if you would like to stay. It is safe and there is plenty to eat. We have clean water from the spring." He gestured behind him where running water was pouring out and into a creek that seemed to run the length of the mountain and further back than I could see. It was all so fascinating. "I guess I would have to know more about your society, but from what I see so far, I think I will love it," I exclaimed as I took in more of my surroundings. "Well, how about a nice hot meal and a bath? Then we can give you a tour to see if it is right for you," the gentleman told me. They escorted me to a private room. I marveled that there were even private rooms in a mountain. The mountain had somehow been hollowed out, and a stone mason must have come in and closed off individual rooms. I was instructed to get undressed and put on a cotton robe that was lying across the bed that was in the room. They must have guests often. I did so and followed a nice older woman out to a common bath area. I was handed a bar of soap, a washcloth, and a towel. I was told to stay in as long as I wished, but my dinner would probably be ready in 30 minutes. The bath area was a huge hot tub. It was the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I scrubbed my entire body and hair. I splashed around a bit before my stomach growled. I had not eaten in 2 days, and the prospect of a hot meal was more than my stomach could bear. I got out and dried off, putting my robe back on. I managed to make my way back to my room and found a steaming hot plate of meat, giant red potatoes, and a cooked carrot. Also on the table was a glass of wine, a glass of water, and a large piece of bread. It did not take long for me to finish my meal. My last hot meal had been over 6 months ago. My last glass of wine, I couldn't even remember. I leaned back and stretched in the chair. A knock at the door revealed a young woman with fresh clothing and instructions to meet the Emperor in the city center at once. The Emperor, eh? Well, it was already a dream come true. I did not care what I was to call him. I didn't even care if I had to bow down and genuflect. I was staying here, and that was it. I had seen more hospitality in under an hour than I had my entire life. This was my new home. Hopefully I could work to earn my keep, and maybe even find someone to start a family with. I got dressed in the handmade brown pants and shirt. It seemed like it was a standard uniform. It was fine. I had no attachment to the clothing I wore anyway. It just felt so nice to be in clean clothes anyway. I felt like a new man as I headed back to the central area I had first stepped in. City center. Well, it was small for a city, but it was heaven to me. Well, hello. The older gentleman was standing by the spring. And how am I to address you, sir? I asked him, trying to be as polite and respectful as I could. Emperor is fine. What is it that they call you? He asked me. I'm Cain, I told him. As in Cain and Abel. Very nice indeed. He smiled awkwardly and began the little tour of Mount Phoenix. Mount Phoenix began back when the people in power could no longer be civil. We wanted a world shut away from the noise and a peaceful existence. We have been here undetected for 15 years. We have reverted back to the beginning of civilization. We have hunters. We have gatherers. We have builders who expand. We have teachers. We have entertainers. We have cooks. We have judges, but we never have to use them. We have hospitality specialists. We have caretakers and physicians, apothecary. Some worthy individuals are allowed to make families to repopulate our community. You name it, we have it. What did you do when you roamed the earth? The Emperor asked me. I was a lawyer. I studied the law, I told him. Oh, well then, we have a special place for you. We are in the process of recording our laws down and displaying them like Hammurabi did for his people. The Emperor lit up. Sure, I would love to help with that, I told him. Hammurabi was actually what got me interested in law in the first place. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, fair and just. Exactly how I liked a society to be ruled. The Emperor led me to his private chambers. I got a lot of sad eyes that followed me as I passed by. I just noticed that every set of eyes I saw were women. Where were all the men? I entered his room and was greeted with the men. They were all shackled against the wall, looking beaten and starved. My first instinct was to turn and run out of the room. The Emperor stopped me. Not so fast. He slammed and latched the door before pushing me down forcibly into a chair. Shackles on an automatic setting immediately slapped over my wrists and ankles. You see, what I didn't tell you, you had to see for yourself. The men here are far inferior, unlike myself, who is chosen to rule this society. I also paraded around Washington as a lobbyist to try to change the laws so we could change the direction the country was headed. But instead, they never listened to me. They had the rich fill their pockets and ignored my pleas. The lawyers were the worst, letting good people hang for the sins of the evil. They are scams of men. The women I can control, manipulate. The ones I can't, get their heads removed from their body. He gestured to a high shelf where heads of countless women were displayed that scanned the perimeter of the room. These men, I like to hang them up and torture them slowly. It helps me sleep at night, he told me through clenched teeth. I noticed his bed finally surrounded by all these tortured men. Each man was shirtless. A different law was inscribed on his body, much like the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not question the emperor. Thou shalt not escape. Thou shalt bleed profusely, and so on. Now, here's a little something to get you started for your law, he smiled. 2 women entered the room and injected a strange fluid into my neck. I began to get woozy. The room was spinning. I looked at the helpless men hanging. One poor gentleman had succumbed to his injuries and was just decomposing for all to see. The stench in the air was horridly pungent. I felt like gagging. I will be back in a moment when the sedative has taken effect. I have to figure out the perfect law to inscribe upon you. He left the room smiling. It's no use, man, came a groan from the wall as a woman was busily removing my shirt. What? I asked, shocked one of them could actually speak. I was there once. I was excited and happy to have gotten out of the crappy state our country had found itself in. But he locked me in here, just like that, to inscribe some stupid bullshit on me. It's his revenge on all the people in power. He takes it out on us. He lost everything in this war. He was poor and powerless, and it drove him mad. He likes to whip us and blame us for our privilege, for doing our jobs instead of being the change. He's trying to punish us for being white and male. He cracked out before passing out into a fever dream. So this was it. I survived the downfall of America, but I could not survive Mount Phoenix. A phoenix was a mythical creature that could be reborn through its own ashes after setting itself ablaze. Well, I hope America could do the same. A utopia was not the answer. Survival was. Welcome to the new American dream.